Sin in the Bible Belt. The Servant Girl Annihilator. Austin, Texas, 1884 to 1885. On the night of December 31st, 1884, as Austin, Texas prepared to welcome a new year, a murder occurred that would mark the beginning of one of the earliest known serial killer cases in American history. The victim was Mollie Smith, a young black domestic servant who lived and worked in Austin. Sometime during the night, she was attacked and killed inside her residence. The brutality of the crime shocked the city, but at the time, it was treated as an isolated incident. It was not. Over the following year, Austin was gripped by a series of murders that followed a disturbing pattern. The victims were primarily domestic servants, many of them black women, attacked late at night, often in or near their homes. The attacks occurred quietly, under cover of darkness, with little warning. As the murders continued, public fear escalated. Newspapers began referring to the unknown killer as the Servant Girl Annihilator, a name that reflected both the victims' occupations and the apparent focus of the attacks. By the time the killing stopped, at least 8 people had been murdered. What made the case especially unsettling was its escalation. Initially, the victims were servants living in modest homes. Later attacks targeted wealthier residents, including white women in more affluent neighborhoods. This shift intensified panic across the city and challenged early assumptions about who was at risk. Austin authorities struggled to respond. In the 1880s, modern forensic science did not exist. There were no fingerprints, no DNA analysis, and limited investigative tools. Law enforcement relied heavily on eyewitness accounts, patrols, and public tips, many of which were unreliable or driven by fear. Suspicion fell on numerous individuals, including local men, laborers, and even members of Austin's growing black community. Several people were arrested, questioned, or briefly jailed, but no charges ever resulted in a conviction. The case also unfolded against a backdrop of racial tension and inequality. Many of the early victims were black women whose lives and deaths were given limited attention by authorities until the violence spread into white neighborhoods. Only then did the murders become a citywide crisis. As fear grew, residents formed patrols, armed themselves, and avoided going out at night. Austin, still a relatively small city, became a place of locked doors and whispered warnings. By late 1885, the killings abruptly stopped. No suspect was ever conclusively identified, and no one was held accountable. Over time, theories emerged suggesting the killer may have been connected to multiple attacks in other regions, or that the murders influenced later crimes elsewhere. Because of similarities in timing and method, the Servant Girl Annihilator has often been compared to Jack the Ripper, though no definitive link has ever been proven. Any connection remains speculative. What is certain is this: one of the earliest serial murder sprees in American history began on New Year's Eve. The case of the Servant Girl Annihilator remains unsolved, not because it lacked victims or witnesses, but because it occurred at a time when systems for justice were incomplete and when the lives of some victims were not afforded equal urgency. More than a century later, the murders that began with Mollie Smith on December 31st, 1884, still raise difficult questions about violence, inequality, and whose lives were considered worth protecting.